Alrighty, that's it. We're on.
Let's go.
I'm here with Meer Awny.
Awny.
Awny. Okay, so that's a great start.
Should we start again?
Yeah, no, that's okay. Meer Awny. Okay, and okay. So, funnily enough, when I was talking to Coach Howe, so what's the correct pronunciation? Is it ethos or ethos?
I would say ethos.
Ethos.
I dare say someone say ethos.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because like I remember when I did the podcast with him, it's like I must have said it the opposite way, and he said ethos.
Did he
And I was
correct
like,
you?
Yeah, he corrected
My
me.
man.
So he did a good job there.
Good. Operations are in place.
That's it. He's looking after you. But yeah, so why I wanted to catch up with you is
I am not going to be able to answer around data as well as House does. So
yeah, that's okay.
I hope that wasn't your intention today, Johnny.
No. Look, I'm really curious about the whole ethos journey, like how it all began, what made you want to do that, and yeah. So I guess if we sort of start from the beginning and try and bring it back as early as possible, so people get a bit of an idea about what your life was like growing up. So were you born in Australia or?
No, my family came here when I was young. I was 3 years old.
Yep.
They were, typical immigrant story from a war-torn country, seeking refuge somewhere where they had better opportunities for their kids.
Yep.
So my family came here when I was 3. My sister was 7, and we're technically as Australian as you can get now.
Yeah.
But I haven't been back home in about 19 years.
Yep.
My intentions are to definitely visit next year.
Yep.
I think,
So is that so home would be what, Lebanon or?
No, I'm Kurdish.
Kurdish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You're gonna have to school me here. What's the
It's
where's
been the story of my life.
Yep.
So Kurds are the world's largest minority.
Okay.
And we technically don't have a country of our own, so we're not a republic. We reside in the borders between Iran, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. And there's been a lot of political conflicts over centuries, ultimately causing the reasons why we don't have our own country, so to say. So if I was going to say I had a country, it'd be called Kurdistan, but that doesn't exist. So I was born there. It's still not a republic, but yeah, we have our own culture, our own, practices, traditions, norms, values. We had our own ancient religious practices dating pre-Islam and pre-Arab civilization also.
Wow.
So you're looking back at some of the first civilizations in that geographical region. So I'm talking back Mesopotamia, the Medes, etc. So there's a long history there. I hope that answers the question.
No, that's a great answer. Out of curiosity, for your parents, how do they sort of view this whole thing? Like, they've escaped a war-torn country to come here. But I guess, from their thinking about their own cultural background, did you guys ever really talk about that much?
In what aspect? As in how they lost that when they came here, or?
Well, I guess when I hear you talk about how, there is no Kurdistan, so to speak.
Well, there isn't, yeah.
Yeah. Do they feel like, that for them in terms of cultural identity, right? Isn't that a struggle to sort of work out who you are?
We have a strong sense of identity within each other, within Kurds, and we're very proud of who we are, and we know who we are, and we've stood our ground against countless conflicts over the centuries.
Yeah.
So the identity within ourselves is very strong. There's no lack of that. It's more so these conversations that hopefully spread things a little further.
Yeah.
There's approximately 70 million Kurdish people worldwide.
Wow.
So it's not by any means a minority per se.
It's a big group of people.
It's the largest minority in the world. There's, almost triple the amount of Kurds in the world as there are Australians. Yep. So, no, I don't think my parents had a lack of identity or problems teaching us values growing up. I think they were pretty good at doing that. It was more so, I think me looking back at when I was a kid, I had these conversations way too often. And I think until I became an adult and I had a different way of thinking about things, I see these conversations as opportunities now.
Yep.
I see them as opportunities to tell you a little bit about my culture and about Kurdish people. Back when I was a kid, it was kind of like an identity crisis. Yeah. Because I thought, no one knows who we are. Do we even exist? Yep. All those sorts of things. I used to get teased for that as well. And even every now and again, friends will tease me now, but I'm a lot firmer with I'm not taking that shit. Yeah.
How do they tease you about being Kurdish?
They'll call me neighboring countries that we may have had generational conflict with or historical conflict with. Okay. We'll be playing a game of, you know, a FIFA as an example when I was younger, and they'd say, "Oh, me, like, why don't you pick your country?" sort of thing, you know. And obviously, I couldn't. Right now, like, I can laugh at that now if my mates say it because I'll give them one back.
Yeah.
But it's as sensitive to me as it is calling like a dark skinned person the N word.
Yeah.
I see it as the same when someone calls me an Arab or
Yeah.
you know, it's like, well, I'm not. I'm a completely different person. Our identity is completely different. Our views are different. So. Yeah, but this is my mature self telling you that I can take it on the chin now and give one back.
Well, I think that's the best way to carry yourself about it, because at the end of the day, if you want to be able to share these ideas with people and have them be open-minded about it, like if you just get upset about it, like they just go, oh, like they may not understand why you're getting so upset about it.
Of course, as with anything.
Yeah.
Right. So I just share my perspective now.
Yep.
Tell them some of the history. I don't get too into it.
Yeah.
And hopefully by the time they leave, if they ever meet someone else, they'll go, oh yeah, I met another guy that was Kurdish.
Yeah.
And I'd be that person.
Yeah. So what made you feel so strongly about, you know, wanting to really share those ideas? And the reason why I say that is because like there'd be a lot of kids and like me from an Asian background, right?
Yep.
I could speak to this, right? You come, like I was born here.
Yep.
My parents are first generation migrants, and you sort of you assimilate into Australian culture, right? Like at one stage I was working for the car brand Holden, right? And I was speaking to this guy on the phone.
I'm a Holden man.
And he came in and he goes to the reception counter. He goes, "I'm looking for Johnny." And I go, "Yes, sir, that's me." And he goes, "You're not fucking Johnny." Right, that was what came out of his mouth. I just sort of like, you know, you got to half laugh it off, right? Like he's still a customer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, backhanded racist compliment, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's like just because I sound like a bogan or I can speak like a bogan,
Yeah.
you know, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to look the way that I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was his first reaction, right? And that still rings true, like such a bell in my head when I think about it.
I think I'll bring it all down to this one thing. I think inherently our culture almost like promotes groups, like classism is a thing. And so you're always going to get some sort of like inherent racism that comes across with different groups and different people. But ultimately, man, we're just all people.
Yeah.
We're just humans, right?
Absolutely.
Color, creed, religion, race, doesn't really matter in my opinion.
Yeah. But that's why I'm curious, you know, what fostered this strong sense of identity in terms of resonating with being Kurdish?
We've been attacked for so long in history. Currently, at the moment, still getting attacked, women getting raped, children getting killed, attacks on borders, attacks on our land, our freedom rights overseas. My cousins don't have clean drinking water, electricity, access to their own money, all those sorts of things. And so when that's been happening for such a long time, and I took a personal interest in kind of learning more about our people and our history, so I could have these conversations with more confidence.
Yeah.
And so I could educate people with more confidence and be sure of what I was telling them.
Yeah.
That's where it came from for me. Because ultimately, I mean, look, where you come from, you know, talk about like ancestry. I kind of believe in all those spiritual sort of things where that probably runs in your blood, like certain characteristics that come from things that you probably can't understand or put a finger on straight away.
Yep.
Whether it be things that came down from your people, where you grew up. You know, Kurds are naturally mountainous people, so we inhabit mountains. We're like nomads, so to say. So maybe that's the reason why I like mountains so much now as an adult, and I like hiking and camping so much. So for me, it was the constant conversations I had with people and seeing them not know who we were as a people group and not understand made me want to educate myself further so I could educate people confidently when those conversations did come up.
And so what age, just out of curiosity, what age did you start really
Probably
looking
22,
into
23.
Yeah.
I started reading when I was like optionally reading when I was around 22.
Yep.
As in some coaches that I was following, I'd see books that they would put up and I thought, okay, well, there seems to be a correlation between people who I look up to and books.
Yep.
So I started reading books. And that was around the same time when I started reading about history and my people and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. And it would have, you know, when you read those sorts of things, it actually would cut pretty deeply, wouldn't it? Like you'd be thinking like, how could people allow these things to happen, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they still happen. And it's we're not the only people group in the world. There's obviously, you know, there's oppression, third world countries all over the world. There's different continents that experience similar things. So, yeah.
Okay. So coming back to childhood, so you came here when you were 3.
Correct.
Yep. And then do you remember anything about what your schooling experience was like?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What do you remember?
I went to Auburn Public School, so I grew up in Auburn.
Yep.
Man, I remember, you know, getting into arguments, getting into like fights with people. I also remember like good experiences like recess, playing, colouring things. I had a crush on my year 6 teacher. I remember more about high school, but I think, I don't have really negative schooling experiences.
Were you an academic kid?
I would say yes, I was. So my first high school was Arthur Phillip in Parramatta.
Yep.
I got suspended from that school for spitting in a teacher's face.
Ooh.
And so
You got to elaborate on the story there.
he made a racial comment
Okay.
at me because I was a hooligan of a kid.
Okay.
And so I spat in his face. Both parties, myself and him, were uncalled for
Yep.
in terms of what he said to me and what I did to him in return.
Yeah.
But considering he was the adult in that situation, he shouldn't have said what he said.
Yeah.
And when I got suspended, I remember seeing a look on my mum's face that I'll never forget. She was so disappointed in me. And she didn't even hit me or anything. She just said, like, you know, we did all of this for you to end up like this. And she walked out of the principal's office.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember thinking, I gotta change. Like I can't let this be what I keep doing.
Yep.
And so my mum at the time was teaching some boys from a Catholic school in Greystanes. And she said, I like the way those boys conduct themselves. I want you to go to that school. So we booked an appointment with the principal of that school. His name was Mr. Dutfield. And when he saw me, I was razor cut mullet. I had slits in my eyebrows, you know, real thug from the area, right? And he said, there's no chance with your grades, the suspension, and the way you look, you're coming to this school. He said, but what I will do, and I think he was empathetic towards my mother. He said, if in a year's time, if you've changed your situation, I'll consider a spot. So over that year, man, I worked my ass off. Like I remember I improved my grades. I sort of stopped hanging out with the group that I was hanging out with. A year's time, went to the St. Paul's interview room, and he said, you know, we'll give you a spot.
Wow.
I think that was a catalyst for a lot of good change in my life, to be honest. I think if I stayed in that public school with the group of people that I was hanging out with, I would have done a lot of bad things, continued to hang out with the wrong people, and you know, who knows where I'd be instead. So my schooling experiences were varied. Pretty much year 9 onwards, I ended up at that Catholic school, St. Paul's, and it was the supportive group of teachers. I made some new friends, moved away from the crowd in Arthur Phillip, getting into a lot of fights, stealing a lot, you know, all those sorts of things. And I think that kind of created a better trajectory. Academic kid, yeah, look, I mean, I've always been as academic as I needed to be. I guess I would say I'm not as, academic as someone like Housen would be.
Yep.
But I have my own skill sets.
Well, House is Asian, so I'm Asian, so I can say that. Right?
My ATAR was, I think, whatever it was like 95.8 or something.
Yeah,
so
that's still very good.
It was good, you know. But yeah, I studied sports science, so I didn't need that high of an ATAR anyway.
Yeah. So I'm always curious about this. You know, when you were coming towards the end of your high school career, you know, have you already worked out what you wanted to do? Or?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay.
You know, ethnic families, I'm sure you're the same. Probably any parent, right? Any parent who values the well-being of their children says, you're going to be a lawyer. My son's going to be a doctor. My son's going to be a surgeon one day. And university is something that was very well respected, and it was almost like a action to the family that you had to do. You had to go to university. It was like a shame to not go to university in my culture, in our household. And so when I approached the end of year 12, I had to pick something, right? And I go to myself, I like sports. I like biology, I did. I liked, you know, the systems, the way the body operated. And I liked PDHPE. So I kind of combined those interests and thought, I'll do a sports science degree.
Yeah.
So finished year 12, ended up at University of Sydney, did sports science, was an interesting roller coaster of failing and ultimately passing and getting my degree in due time.
So can we talk about the failing? So what happened? You just went focused?
Being in an all-boys school, turning 18, going to university, being the sort of person I was, there was just a lot of, you know, drinking, partying, hanging out with girls, going out a lot, and I was fighting at the time as well. I was training a lot, so my focus wasn't where I needed to be.
Yep.
I was by all means not a mature age student, and I failed some units. My friend, Julian Kim, he was a super clever guy. We'd all sit next to him during exams and literally just copy his papers. But my first year, I learned some lessons at uni. I realized I couldn't do what I was doing and continue to, I couldn't keep failing and expect anything else to happen. So I had to repeat 2 units at the final year, which was a very crazy year for me because of the fact that I had 6 units to do effectively. But anyway, got that done. And then when I graduated university, my best friend and I packed our bags up and backpacked around the world for about 9 months.
Wow.
Which was an unforgettable experience.
Okay. So there's quite a bit to unpack there. When it comes to making such a big decision to go and say, hey, I'm going to backpack around the world for 9 months, like, was that something that you guys had already planned for years? Or
we were at a bar called La Cita. They closed down now because the lockdown drinking laws ruined their business
City.
operations.
Yeah.
So we were at a bar and we thought we should go to South America when we finish university. We're like, yeah, let's do it. Cheers. Deal. We thought, you know what, we should go to the World Cup, 2014 World Cup. We should see Ronaldo play. And then we went, cheers, we're going to make it happen. And what was supposed to be like a 3-week trip, it just exacerbated and became a mammoth. It became 9 months, 16 countries. So we were saving for about 2 years, working all sorts of jobs that I probably won't talk about to save them.
You can share like obviously the different things that you did
to save the money. Like I was working for the National Workforce, doing asbestos, cleaning shit, working at the dump, doing dodgies in my security job, stealing, selling counterfeit clothing, all these sorts of things.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've come a long way,
You've
Johnny.
come a long way. You know, it's funny, you know, when I listen to you sort of recount all these different things, it's like you go off track a little bit and then at some point you go, oh, probably shouldn't be doing this. And you sort of correct yourself. And then you go off, then you find a new thing to go off track with. And then you come a little bit away and then you go, yeah, probably shouldn't be doing this.
You know, when I got back from that overseas trip, I was working at a commercial facility and I wasn't enjoying working for someone or a group of people who didn't have the ideas that I had or the execution that I had. And so I ended up just subcontracting and starting my own personal training business. That was me at 22. And since then, I've just worked for myself and kind of built my own thing. It was at about 23 that I realized an interest in working with more athletic populations. And when I got into that industry, you know, volunteering, just spending time in those environments, I realized that working with combat athletes was going to be very hard in Sydney, in Australia at the time.
Yeah.
The sport was very young and the acceptance of high performance in combat sports in the country was almost non-existent. And I couldn't really find anybody that I could look up to and kind of have as a mentor here, kind of like what we try to do for a lot of students now at Ethos. And so I think, you know, you talk about me steering off sometimes. When I realized that passion, it's pretty much been full on focus for me from there. Not that I haven't enjoyed myself. I've traveled several times since then. I've enjoyed the process. I turned 30 this year. And so when I reflected and I spent some time looking back in my 20s, I was very proud of myself and happy with the experiences that I had, both, you know, personally, professionally. But yeah, definitely when I realized that I wanted to work with combat athletes and I accepted that my own competitive days were not my focus anymore, it gave me a lot of clarity and it continues to give me a lot of clarity now. I think one of the athletes I was speaking with this morning, he said, you always seem like you have a lot of energy. You always seem like you're just going. He said, like, you know, is there something that you're drinking, something that you're eating? And it was a fair question. And I told him, you know, everybody's different. Me personally, because I enjoy what I do so much, I kind of that intrinsically fuels me to just keep working and enjoying the process. I think if I stopped enjoying the process, it'd be very clear that energy would decline. But that was kind of my answer to him also. So
I think that's definitely there's truth in that. You know, there's probably so many people out there that are waking up in the morning dreading the fact that they've got to wake up and go work some.
It's sad.
Job.
It's sad. I'm empathetic towards everyone. It's sad. I mean, the society we live in, the systems that we have to operate within make it hard to pursue passions. You know, the median free hours that men and women have now is continuously declining compared to what they were 50 to 60 years ago. The correlation between our wages and the cost of living is not linear together. There's a difference between the two. And so you're a father of 4, you understand that the cost of living now is harder. Single income households can't be sustained anymore. People have to work 2 jobs. And so sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, right? Not everybody can have the privilege of waking up and loving what they do and working in an environment that's fun and exciting gives them purpose and fulfills all their cups, which is why I'm very grateful for it, and I don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
Because I'm well aware, and I've also been in that position where I didn't enjoy what I was doing. And since that day, I've thought I'm going to keep doing what I enjoy doing and work my ass off at it.
Yeah. No, like I think, that's definitely a factor, right? But I also think there's people that probably just keep those handcuffs on for too long, that you get stuck in this rut of wanting more. So that's a big trap for a lot of fathers. You get to this point where it's, I need to provide for my family. And like I saw this all throughout the automotive industry where, we'd call them industry statistics, right? You just end up a statistic where, you get to a management level position, you end up divorced because you're never at home, right? You never see your wife, you never see your kids and family, so therefore they divorce you. And then you end up sleeping with the 20-something-year-old receptionist or the aftermarket girl or something like that. And we just say, you're an industry statistic.
Yeah.
And so I think, you have to recognize where your priorities are in life. Like they change throughout life. Like don't get me wrong. Like when I was at uni, I was working at the same time, and I always reflect on this and go, oh, that was some of the hardest years of my life. I was studying a double degree. I was at TAFE 1 day a week. I was doing a full-time mechanical apprenticeship and trying to do all this stuff and training, 5 to 7 nights a week.
Yeah.
And, when I sort of think back on as to why I managed to get through that period is because I didn't give myself any other choice. I probably didn't have any time to sort of reflect and go, why the fuck am I doing this?
You're also part of a different generation of people. I think work ethic is something that's very hard to come across now. And I've interviewed a lot of students, interviewed a lot of applicants for jobs, had a lot of interns come to our facility, observed the standard of work practices in several industries. I have a lot of friends, a lot of business owners, different industries, landscaping, restaurant owners, et cetera, et cetera. And I think now with the rising use of social media and the laziness that exists in a lot of people because things are so easy now. You can go to a supermarket now and get everything you need within 10 minutes. How you can get it delivered to your front door now. So people's ability to want to work is very different because their drivers aren't what my parents were or your parents were, or even what yours were when you were 16 years old, So I'm empathetic, but I also observe behaviors now, and I think people are slowly becoming lazier. We're getting a lot of comforts given to us in this society now. Social media is great, video games are great, TV is better than it ever has been in terms of the quality and the accessibility. Computers are awesome, video games are awesome, pornography is skyrocketing. And so while I'm empathetic, people also need to identify that the change that they can make is within them to make. Yeah. So it's that simple, really.
Yeah, that's right. People have to realize that it's their choice at the end of the day. It's not like you just fell and landed on the remote and suddenly the pornography's on.
Of course, definitely, 100%.
You made a conscious decision to go and search out the material.
If we zoom out systemically, it's not as easy as, it's your choice. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps and make it happen. Because, any person will understand that geography, family, generational trauma, all those things do exist also. An African kid or an African American growing up in Detroit is going to have less chances of what we call success compared to a kid that grows up in the eastern suburbs of Bondi and Sydney, right? So, yes, choice is important, but, depends how deep you want to get into that conversation.
Well, I think, the fact that there are anomalies that exist is proof that anyone can achieve it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the way that I would look at it, but I know not everybody would look at that because, I got this when I was working and I'll be trying to teach somebody how to do something and they'd be like, I can't do it like that. And I'd be like, why? And it's like, because I'm not you. It's like, it doesn't matter who the fuck you are. Like this, if you do the process, you get the right outcome. Yeah. Right? I feel like, and this is probably going into a little bit of the sports science stuff. I remember, John Langmeyer, he came and did a talk. So he was the Sydney Swans coach for a little bit of time.
Yep.
And he was talking about how, part of the culture is driven on you need to now focus on the inputs and not the outputs. Don't focus on the scoreboard. Correct. Focus on the activities, right?
Well, the controllables.
The controllables, right? Because everybody always focuses on the outcome and go, oh, you lost this match. Well, hang on a second. Where do we lose it, right? Because looking at a scoreboard is only going to give you two very basic points of data, right?
Definitely. Even in like sports psychology, intentions are something that they focus on, where you focus your intentions and your actions and your attentions, etc. And if you're constantly focusing on winning and the external things that you can't ultimately control, then you're placing your intentions in the wrong place. So, yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah. So, I'm also a little bit curious about, when you did this 9-month hiatus and traveled the world, what sort of changes did you find in you as a person?
A lot of perspective, seeing different people a lot of third world countries, seeing the way people live. It also kind of was an ironic view of different levels of happiness indexes in countries where you'd expect to not see so much happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously happiness is a very blanket figure. What is happiness? What makes people happy, etc. But, you know, I remember I was in an island in Bolivia on Lago Titicaca, and this was like an island, man, you had to get there by a small little boat. And on the island, they had no reception, no like artificial lighting. It was all just candles. And I just watched these kids play with their parents. It was such a simple life. And you question, oh man, they're missing out. They're missing out on all the things that we have. But then how much of what they experience do we never experience?
Yeah.
Quality time with your parents, appreciating land, spending time looking at the stars, spending time starting a fire, spending time harvesting your own food, all those sorts of things. I learned a different language when I was overseas.
What language?
Spanish. I learned a lot about managing conflicts with people because I was traveling with a friend of mine for 9 months, so there were inevitably going to be conflicts along the way. I learned a lot, man. Traveling's awesome. I recommend it for everyone.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I think, you know, every time you travel, you gain a certain level of maturity that you can't get from being in the same place.
Definitely.
You know, and I think also it allows you to explore different aspects of your personality, because I think far too often we get holed into this idea of who we are when we're in our house or we're in our, you know, hometown, so to speak.
Yeah.
That when you go overseas and you realize that nobody fucking knows who you are, it
cares.
doesn't matter.
No one cares.
Right? You can explore these other parts of your personality to really try and identify who you are and what it is that you like.
Yeah. We're self-serving, right? So we create bubbles and we live within those bubbles, and we rarely get ourselves out of those bubbles and widen our experiences. So when you go to another country, you're forced to do that. You have to meet new people. You have to ask things. You have to potentially, you know, communicate without being able to speak a language. You run into problems. You run into challenges. I love those challenges when you're traveling. It's great.
Are there any that, you know, when you think of that, you know, the challenges that you've faced whilst traveling, is there any like that come to mind?
Getting into fights with security guards in strip clubs, getting arrested in Mexico, seeing Lil Jon, getting into a fight at the concert because some guy was trying to be a dick to a girl, all the way to sitting in a hot salt pool sort of thing at the tip of a waterfall in the middle of nowhere. So many experiences, man. Yeah, I love it. It's great. I actually haven't been able to travel for a long time because of the business also. Yeah. And this touches on what you were speaking about with priorities. I think, you know, choices, priorities, these are all things we need to deal with daily. And as an example, obviously COVID didn't make things any easier, but starting the business, I had to accept that if I wanted something to grow and flourish, and had to divert all my energy towards that. And that meant not necessarily traveling as much as I wanted to. Yeah. And it's the same now. Like when you look at all the things in life that matter to you, at different stages, you feed different energy to those things. Yeah. You know, for you, I'm sure it's your role as a father. And like you said earlier, those things shift over time. Yeah. When I was 23, I wrote an article for one of the coaches I used to look up to, and his name's Tony Jenical, and it was my views on how to be taken seriously in this industry before you're 30 years old. Yep. And I want to reach out to him soon and say, hey, let me write part 2 because I'm 30 now. Yep. So let me tell you what I learned in the last 7 years as like a retrospective, you know, blog, so to say. So, yeah, I think I guess we should touch on the ethos thing now because we haven't so far.
Yeah, no, let's get into it.
Starting from me letting you know that I realized my passion in working with combat athletes. Yep. And that's essentially where Ethos started. That's me making it very easy. I'm shortening the story for you. It was very hard, as with anything that's worthwhile. Yep. But I traveled overseas for internships and for further education. I worked for free for a lot. I ate a lot of shit, which is something I use as a reference a lot. I think if you can't eat shit, or the scientific term is distress tolerance, your ability to be able to, you know, take shit and keep moving forward, as Rocky Balboa
Resilience.
would say. Resilience. Yep. Grit, as per that book also, great book, Grit. So I've demonstrated that a lot in the last 7 years, call it in life. Continue to every day. There's always challenges in business. There's always challenges in life. But Ethos for me was something that hasn't really faded at all in terms of passion, in terms of purpose for myself. And I think that's why I'm still very energetic towards it. There's still a lot that I want to do. When I was younger, I I would dream of where I am now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you actually had this idea that you wanted to create something.
Yeah, I
like
thought,
this.
man, one day I want to have my own gym, and I want to be able to walk in and have a good team, and have a sports science, and have all these athletes everywhere, and I want to be able to make an income working with athletes, and creating a high performance environment, and I want to be the best high performance facility for combat athletes in the whole country. I don't even want to be close to anybody else, and that's all I want to focus on, and that's what I did.
So, okay, let's backpedal one step, because obviously, you've had some experience in combat as well, right?
Yes.
And so let's talk a little bit about that background.
Yep.
And then I'm also curious about your transition from there to deciding it's not about me competing anymore, it's about me helping other people.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll summarize it. So
You don't have to summarize.
I started with Muay Thai and MMA. I was working with Chek Fai at Jinwoo Kun.
Yes.
And I was working with an MMA coach named John Levin at the time.
Yes, he's at Customers CFS.
CFS, correct.
In Kirui.
By way of those two people, I started training with a wrestling coach named Mark Stefaniev at the time. He put me in touch with the crew at Boxing Works, so I started training there back when Larry was around and the chief, Peter Graham.
Yep.
And then Mark said, you need to work on more wrestling and work on more boxing. And I moved further out west at the time, so I was training with Mark and then also doing some stuff with the guys at Sydney Wrestling Academy.
Yep.
And then I joined a gym called Full Combat Center. That was Shane Nix's gym.
Okay.
Shane Nix at the time was one of the best pro MMA athletes in the country, great fighter. And in that gym, I met all sorts of different people that I actually coach now, and people that I still consider friends. So I started boxing out of that facility under Coach Rodney Williams, who I'm still on great terms with now. I met a lot of good friends at that gym. There was also Tama Tahuna, James Tahuna. They were co-sparring, and they'd have like joint ventures with Shane Nix, because they were all part of the same crew.
Yep.
That's when I also would see Tyson Pedro, Tai Tuivasa come in to train as younger athletes at the time.
Yep.
Obviously, they didn't know who I was, and I just kind of knew that they were the guys in the area that were going to be great. It got to a point for me when I was still competing in amateur boxing and training in MMA when I was in university. But in my spare time, I wasn't dedicating further efforts towards the sport. It was more towards reading and researching on how I could make myself better physically in the sport. And I've said this on previous podcasts. I wasn't watching fight tape or YouTube videos on how to throw better jabs. I was watching how to become faster in the gym, how to become stronger, how to put on more muscle, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I think I just kind of made a realization that it's not the sort of sport where I wanted to be half in. So I kept training, and I still train in martial arts, but I then diverted my energy towards my studies further, because I knew that I could help athletes with the things that I wasn't getting help with. That's the start of the story, essentially. So during university, I kept fighting, I kept training. After university, I went overseas. I got back, started working at a commercial gym, and then I guess that initial drive that existed of working with athletes kind of re-sparked, and since then it's been me working my butt off to create something in a space that's very hard to create something.
Yep.
So the industry, the strength and conditioning industry, is very cutthroat. Strength and conditioning coaches, professionals are underpaid, undervalued, underappreciated. Not a sob story, it is just what it is, right? First to get cut and the first to get blamed. And so to create a job in that industry is very hard, because it's a niche within a niche.
Yeah.
What I did was go even further, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not just going to focus on athletes. I'm only going to focus on combat athletes. So a lot of people thought I was silly. They thought it wasn't a smart, business move to do so, because fighters were poor. They wouldn't pay. There wasn't enough of them. And I mean, at the time, you could say that I was probably one of the first people in the country that really made a push for it. So the market opportunity was great for me. I didn't really know that at the time. I was just focusing on learning and being a good coach. But in retrospect, when I analyze things now, I was at the start of the wave of the Oceania period in the UFC and in combat sports.
Yep.
So I came in at a great time. And, if I try to do the same thing right now in today's market, a very different story, because there's a lot of other coaches who have entered the market. They've seen the market opportunity. You've got guys that call themselves grappling expert S&C coaches, boxing expert S&C coaches. And it's great. It's great because it means that there's an appreciation for it, and there's market share for it. That there's people interested in it. I don't really compete with other people. I don't focus on that stuff. I just focus on what we do at Ethos, how we can be better, how we can continue to be first in class, and that's it, man. That's the story.
I'm curious about how you cultivated this mindset, because you mentioned earlier on in the podcast that
That's a good question. I don't know how I cultivated the mindset.
Because you mentioned that you started to read
years, man.
books
Years and years and years and years of sacrifice, hard work, training hard, reading books, surrounding myself with the right people, backing myself every single day. I'm my own number one fan. I back myself every day.
But where do you think this strong sense of self-belief comes from?
I'm Kurdish, man.
Is it, you reckon that after you read the history of the Kurdish people, you're like, let's go.
When I speak to my dad sometimes, and I'll go, I'm doing these things, I'm working on these things. He's like, you're Kurdish. It's like, it's in your blood to do that. He's like, you're a soldier. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. No, look, I think I did a great job of taking risks, and I've always had a very strong lust for life. And I think that genuinely does stem from a story that I've been told as a kid, which is our people have suffered for so long. So my family came here. I saw them take a chance, take a risk, and I just do the same thing. Yes, reading. Yes, surrounding yourself with good people. Going overseas, spending money, taking risks. I opened Ethos during lockdown. I opened a gym business during a pandemic when gyms were the first businesses to get closed.
Yep.
Signed a 5-year lease. So for me, it's always been like, have a go, just have a crack.
Have there been any moments where you've been like,
oh my God,
I'm fucked?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Can you share a prominent one?
Yeah, man. I think second lockdown, you could call it, I wouldn't call it depression. I'd call it a very down period in my life. I was very challenged, obviously financially, but I think just in terms of making operational decisions, like what the fuck are we going to do right now? Because the income of the business halved overnight. And I still had overheads. I still had my rent, my insurances, electricity bills, loans. And I had to make a call. And I think the team and myself, I from the front showed a lot of resilience during that time. We kept a presence in front of our members. We gave them opportunities to continue to train. We rented gazebos, set up permanent structures outdoors so we could see 3 people a day just to show face, right?
And keep going.
And not give up, right? Because I think it was a quality that a lot of people were kind of leaning towards. Like, okay, those guys are doing it. We're going to deviate towards them. That was a very hard period, man. I'm not going to lie. For business, it sucked. I know very close friends of mine who went through a very hard time, went through drug abuse, etc., because their businesses essentially shut down during lockdown. So that was a very challenging period. I've had many challenging periods in my life. I've almost died in a car accident when I was 16. That taught me a lot. Lost a lot of friends.
Whoa. Stop. Hold up. Let's go back to the...
So go back to when I was 16. I was telling my friend the story today. So when I was 16, I thought I was Vin Diesel. We were speaking about Fast and the Furious earlier. I had an 86 VL Commodore, rear-wheel drive, no airbags.
Was it a VL turbo?
It wasn't a turbo. I was on my L, so I couldn't have a turbo at the time because of the restrictions. But I jigged school, took the car out, drifting, thought I was, Tom Toretto, right? Drifted like a spastic, went around, I won't say spastic, it's not a nice word, drifting like a hooligan. Did a 80 kilometer an hour turn around a telegraph pole, went sideways into the telegraph pole, and I broke my femur in half, like a clean biscuit break, broke my tibia, broke my scaphoid. I had nerve damage in my left hand, so much so that, what is that now, 14 years later, my left wrist is killing me today because I was doing some power cleans and just the position of the bar hurts my wrist where the screw is, the insertion of the screw. Man, that taught me a lot. I was stuck in the car for an hour. They had to cut me out of the car. I couldn't walk for 4 months. I was on crutches for 4 months. They said I'd never fight again or I'd never play sports again.
It's a pretty big injury to come back from.
Massive.
Like a fever break, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
And at the time it was, man, so many challenges. I couldn't pee. My mum had to take me to the toilet. My mum had to wash me. She had to shave me, cut my hair, etc. So it was a very humbling experience, not being able to walk, seeing people running outside, limping for about 6 months. And even till today, like long periods of sitting, even like right now, my right leg's starting to bug me a little. It's telling me to stand up.
Yeah.
I still have titanium and 4 screws in the right side of my body and a screw in the left wrist. So I think those moments, two things happen. You either grow or you don't. I've always leaned, I think now I've experienced so many of those moments in life whenever I have a challenge now, I just go towards it. I'm like, okay, I know what's happening. There's a challenge.
Well,
how can I get better from this?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, because it's the same when it comes to the selling, anything that you're selling. If you're in the sales industry,
Yep.
rain that I'm
It's
hearing?
rain.
It is rain, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, when you're in the sales industry, a lot of people want to shy away from those difficult conversations. Whereas if you actually run headfirst into those objections, you actually clear the way to actually then do business.
I think in any industry, in any interaction, difficult conversations are important. Conflicts need to be resolved, whether it's in romantic relationships, in friendship relationships, in business relationships. Shying away from conflicts is avoiding problems.
Yeah.
Problems that get avoided for a long period of time become bigger problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they become issues that, at some point you're like, I didn't
Become
know.
a deal breaker.
You hated me for 2 years.
Yeah.
Why did we never speak about this?
Yeah.
And so, conflicts need to be dealt with, and those are difficult conversations. Conversations that you have to have with a coach. Conversations of speaking to an athlete. Conversations of speaking with a colleague that you might not want to have. People have a hard time dealing with those conversations because A, we're never taught how to deal with those situations in school, and B, it's easier to not have them. As it is, it's easier to not make hard decisions. It's easier to not try the thing that you want to try because you're like, I might fail, or it's expensive, etc. Which is also why I love the population group that I work with, because they take risks every day.
Yeah.
All these athletes that spend money on training and food and supplements and dietitians and working with us and, mindset coaches, they're all just taking risks, but they're pursuing something that makes them happy.
Yeah.
That it fulfills them. So when you're working with those people full time, it's cool because you're effectively working with people that have very similar mindsets in a certain way.
Yeah. I think we're all just a little bit mentally broken in some way, and that's why we tend towards this, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, like when I talk to most guys that are competing and things like that, what's the right way to say? It's not necessarily that you have something to prove, but there is something that you're trying to prove to yourself. Yeah,
potentially. I mean, I'd rather prove it to myself than prove it to other people, right? So it's more intrinsically focused.
Yeah.
I've always said that I think combat sports is very unforgiving.
Yeah.
It's not that other sports don't have their demands, and I'm very respectful of all of the athletes because they all have to make their own sacrifices. But fighting is very brutal, even at an amateur level.
It's raw. It's visceral.
It's very raw. There's a reason why so many people, deviate towards it all over the world. Why it's the fastest growing sport in the world, because it's almost barbaric, but it's like a synchronized chess match when you understand what's happening.
There's no greater freedom in the world. Like, it's as horrible as it sounds, right? And
I'd say the closest thing is dance.
Dance?
Yeah.
There's no physical consequences, though.
There's no physical consequences in terms of damage, but in terms of expression, I think even when you look at a lot of research around dance as a figure that creates awe in people, there's a book actually called Awe, A-W-E. It's a great book, talks about this a lot. Dance is one of those expressive things. There's a reason why all people groups all over the world have their own dances. Dance around fires, dance in groups, dance in circles. Dance, I think, is an expression of individuality, as I think martial arts is.
Well, what happens if you're that Gumby that can't dance?
You learn. Just like a white belt picks up jiu-jitsu and becomes a black belt in 10 years' time. But there are definitely some people that shouldn't be dancing.
Yeah, it's funny that. But like I always... whenever I smell like the fresh leather of the gloves, it just takes me into that moment. I love it. And it's just like, that it's, like one of my teammates, Jackie, he made this comment after his last fight. He basically said, if I was to do this on the street, you get locked up, but I do it in here and I'm a champion.
Isn't that what they asked Ty as well? Bam Bam. They asked him. He goes, I could fight in a pub or I could fight in front of thousands of people and get paid for it. Yeah. So it's the same thing, I suppose, right? Yeah. But I think martial arts at its core teaches people a lot of good lessons about patience. It's humbling every single day, every single training session. You're either getting schooled by someone else, or you're getting tapped out, whatever it is. I think it's very easy to help people drop their ego a little when you're involved in martial arts. I think martial arts, some form of martial arts should be a compulsory, almost like a curriculum point in school. Yep. Not that kids need to get hit. I'm not saying that. I'm saying self-defense and the qualities you learn through martial arts is very admirable. And so, kids taking jiu-jitsu, doing karate, doing, the skills required in boxing, but not necessarily sparring each other, obviously.
Yep.
I think I would definitely advocate for that.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I think for kids, it's about doing things that are difficult, really.
Of course.
Because if you want to increase the kids' confidence, the best way to do that is through competence. Making them good at something.
And exploration.
Yeah.
Making them do lots of things.
Yeah.
Not just specializing. Okay, you're going to be a boxer. You're the next world champion at 6 years of age.
Yeah.
Let that kid do several things. Again, there's lots of good research on that also. Not specializing kids at a young age, letting them explore various different things, because the brain is very plastic. So if you can give them all these tools while they're young, when they get older, they can pull out the tool that they want to start using more often. Instead of saying, you only get a hammer, that's all you fucking get. You're going to use a hammer for the rest of your life. And then they get to 22 years of age, they're like, I hate this hammer. I never want to see this hammer again.
Yeah, but they don't have any other tools.
Exactly right.
So when it comes to developing combat athletes, do you think about that, like in terms of like priming them neurally as well? Like,
What do you mean?
So I guess the easiest example I could bring up is, I don't know if you remember, there was like this headset that was being promoted, the Halo Neuro, which would which you had to, it had electrodes that, when you can listen to music, it would also zap you through your skull. And basically it was priming you to be more neuroplastic for your next session. And the reason I bring this up is because I did try it. Right?
Yeah.
And
Hey,
for me,
I've tried a lot of things too.
so
Marketing is very powerful.
I felt like, maybe there's something to this, but maybe I would also find that I would get very tired and have headaches in the afternoon after using it. So whether I had it turned up too high or whether it just didn't work for me in that regard, like perhaps maybe for the session it was really, really good, but then I would have like this massive crash. And so I sort of took this mindset that, there's no free lunch, right? Like if you're going to get this increased gain for this short window of time, you're going to be paying for it somewhere else. And that was probably the payoff in the sense that I probably need to sleep more or do something else.
You need to make those decisions consciously now as an adult, right? It's literally what you just said. So, okay, I'm working on launching another business at the moment, and so I'm very well aware that for the next acute period of 0 to 6 months, there is going to be nights where sleep isn't optimal, where my nutrition isn't optimal, where I'm not training as much as I want to. But again, you make that decision, that choice to accept that, and then you work with the circumstance as it comes up.
Yep.
Why were we talking about Halo?
I was asking you in terms of like when it comes to athletes, right?
Priming them neurally.
Yeah.
Priming them neurally. So, I don't know if you're asking me that question, but effectively, part of training does involve neural adaptations.
Yep.
We definitely consider that when we're working with athletes, because they are adaptations that you need to work on. Depending on the level of the athlete, both in their sport and in the gym environment, whether they are in or out of camp, our focus on what we work on changes. When they're in camp, depending on things like their weight cut, their level of sport, their level of training in the gym, we might have a focus on priming them more, focusing on more like neuromuscular adaptations. So the demand on their physiological system isn't so heavy.
Yep.
So that way they're not as sore or they're not as fatigued. So those are definite considerations that we make. We put out a cool stat last week, and it made me sit back and really appreciate everything. We've prepared over 600 competitive bouts since I started working with fighters across all different sports: MMA, judo, BJJ, wrestling, boxing, both professional and amateur, Muay Thai. And what I'm getting at with this is a lot of the systems that we've put in place now, they didn't just happen overnight, and we're continuously refining them at Ethos. And the reason why we refine at such an accelerated rate is because of the amount of practice we have with that population group. So you might have a coach who gets to work with 6 to 10 athletes a week, and they're combat athletes. We have sometimes 40 combat athletes that walk into the facility on a given day, and they're at various levels and different sports. So we have a lot of subjects from a scientific perspective. We have a lot of trials that we can start.
This is where Halson starts to get really excited.
Well, it is. We've done so many case studies in-house. We've got more data on combat sport athletes than any organization, I dare say, probably in the country, especially private organizations, definitely. And it's been by way of us reaching out to gyms, networking, and just having a passion for that sport. And I think House definitely shares that passion. Over the last 2 years, he's definitely shown his growing interest in combat sport athletes, what they go through, preparing them. And it's been great, man. It's been a lot of good fun. And we are not planning on slowing down. There's different things that I want to achieve. I want a bigger facility. And I don't want it for the fame or from, the perceived idea of, they're succeeding or that sort of stuff. It's purely just to help more people, help more athletes. Because at a certain point, there are things that I want to do right now that we just can't do.
Yeah.
We can't facilitate it because of spatial limitations, resources. And so the bigger play for myself will be in the next 2 to 3 years to have a bigger facility, help more combat athletes, provide avenues and pathways for different athletes outside of combat sports, grow the team, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. All right. Before we, I know you got to run soon, so
Yes.
I want to just segue into this weird topic because we talked about psychedelics before.
All right.
Let's just.
You had to bring it up.
I had to bring it up. Come on, let's talk about it because I'm curious about
Okay.
what sort of experiences you've had that have changed you and your mentality on things.
I think one thing I will say is in the scientific industry, we become very indoctrinated at an early age and early in our careers to believe that one way is the only way. And then I think our political, our government systems are all interconnected and they feed us stories. And now with social media and mass marketing, it's very easy to tell people stories and sell people stories. I won't comment on that in further detail over what's happened over the last 3 years. But you look at psychedelics, before the war on drugs with Nixon, I think that was in the 60s or 70s, there was a lot of cognitive therapy being done with psychedelics. And there were a lot of good preliminary studies at the time and good results at the time. And we live in a society where you can pick up alcohol at free will over the age of 18, anywhere in Sydney. You can buy cigarettes over the counter. But something like a mushroom that grows out of the soil is considered an illegal drug. Same as raw milk, it's illegal. And so I'm very skeptical of trusting what the indoctrinated systems tell us is good and bad for us. That's my take on, I guess, the pharmaceutical industry as a whole, right? When you look at a lot of ancient groups, the Mayans, Incans, groups from Africa, there's a lot of counts of experiences with psychedelics, different psychedelics. Look at ayahuasca in Peru, etc. And I think people for a long time have tried to create experiences where they can connect to a higher power and connect to different parts of themselves. Because I also do believe that naturally we guard from experiencing a lot. It's almost like a self-protection mechanism, I feel. Which is why most of my experiences with psychedelics have been in nature. They've been they have been when I have been around people that I love, people that I'm very close to, and in nature when we're sitting around a fire or we're by a river or we're camping, because I always tell people like, what should I expect if I'm, my first time doing psychedelics, and I tell them it essentially inhibits all of the things that prevent you from being your best self, your most loving self, your happiest self. I've never done them in a party environment. I've never done like ecstasy pills and that sort of stuff. Never had anything for like drugs, but I think there's a lot of history in psychedelics. I'm talking like psilocybin. There's a lot of interesting history. I know my dog's bothering you right now.
No, it's all good.
He wants a pat.
Yeah.
Ask me more specific questions if you like.
I'm curious in terms of what was probably the most profound experience.
The most profound experience.
Yeah. And if you had any negative ones. So 2 questions. The first one is
I've never had a negative experience. Never. I think if you have a negative experience, it's your internal self showing itself. And I think that's an opportunity for you to realize that you need to work on those things. I've always done it when I've been in a good place. One of the most profound experiences was I was with my partner and we were sitting in a river, on a rock in a river, literally.
In a river, okay.
And just this feeling came across me that I really wanted to be a dad.
Yep.
And I started bawling my eyes out. And I just felt this deep sense of love. Another time I was with a group of friends and all men. I remember we were sitting around a fire and everybody just stood up. We all started hugging each other, telling each other how much we appreciated each other, that, we were strong figures in each other's lives. So there's definitely some great memories.
Yeah.
I've never had a bad memory.
So then, out of curiosity then, Does that influence the way that you view spirituality or religion?
That's a complex question. It hasn't changed the way I view it. It's just added to my perceptions of it.
Yep.
I'm a spiritual person. I grew up by way of Kurds being assimilated into Arab civilization. It was initially a Zoroastrianism was our religion, and then it became Islam.
Okay.
So I grew up as a Muslim. I identified a lot with that religion. I still have a lot of respect for the cultures and values of Islam, but psychedelics haven't changed my opinions of religion. It's just it's opened my eyes to different things. I think everybody should experience it at some point.
Yeah.
But you also need to experience it at the right time with the right people.
Yeah.
In the right environment.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. No, I definitely, that resonates to me. My wife is always like, you're always talking about it. And I'm like, well, if it comes up in conversation, it comes up. Yeah. Because I feel like
it's almost taboo, right? It's like you can't talk about it. We can sit here and talk about cigarettes, alcohol, and it's normal. Because we've been told that it's normal.
Yeah.
And through social media now, we're getting told that a lot of other things are normal. Like men can be women, and men can have babies, and it's almost like there's a misconstrue of what is normal effectively.
Yeah.
There's a.
I think the concept that people who talk about this would say it's natural law, right? There's this idea of natural law in terms of how things should be.
Correct. Look,
and then when we go into
you can mess with nature as much as you like. At the end of the day, it always wins.
Yeah.
But the problem is now, because you can so easily access billions of people around the world, it's very easy to start creating stories and selling it to people. So the whole point of what I was saying there was, when you talk about psychedelics, it is a taboo. You can't talk about it. It's it's a drug, it's bad for you, etc. But as with a lot of other things, people have no education around the topic. They haven't done their own due diligence to look at the research, to look at what it actually does for people. I've given it to my mother. She had a fantastic experience. She was sitting by a fire. She was crying a lot. She was saying a lot of nice things. She had a lot of moments to herself. And there's a reason why they were using it during therapy for a long time, 40 to 50 years ago. And the field is starting to grow again because people are realizing that it has a lot of therapeutic effects.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been approved in Australia for therapy now.
Definitely. Yep. Yeah, definitely. So it should be.
Yeah. All right. Well, if people want to find you, give your businesses a shout out.
So I'm on Instagram. My personal Instagram page is Meer Awny.
Yep.
And then the gym facility is Ethos Performance. And we also have another page called Ethos Athlete, which is dedicated to all of our non-combat sport athletes.
Okay.
Because we have an amazing crew of non-combat athletes at our facility also.
Yep.
And my most recent business, I won't share the name yet, but it's on my bio. It's called Overwatch. Okay. So our intention, our vision is to enable business owners in the health and fitness space with content and digital strategy.
Yep.
Because a lot of these organizations that I've worked with in the past have ill intentions, don't actually want to help businesses, and they overprice and overcharge and underdeliver. And those are all the things that we aim not to do.
All right. Beautiful. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Johnny, appreciate your time.
All good.
Thank you.
No, thank you.